We are just coming up on 9 p.m. Eastern here at MSNBC headquarters in New York. I'm Rachel Maddow. Super happy to have you with us here this evening. I'm here in studio with my beloved colleagues, Joy Reid and Nicole Wallace, and we've got the eighth wonder of the news world, Steve Kornacki at the big board, who's been processing data for us over the course of the night. The marquee race, of course, tonight is in Virginia, where the governor's race there is still too close to call at this hour. But NBC News is projecting that Republican Glenn Youngkin holds the lead. We've been watching those votes come in over the course of the night. We've got about 63% of that vote in. Again, still too close to call, but Youngkin in the lead. In New Jersey, the race there is still too early to call. You see less than 15% of the vote in. That's the New Jersey governor's race, where Democrat Phil Murphy is trying to earn a second term against Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli. We're going to be checking back in with Steve about where things stand in both of those races in just a moment. I do just also want to note that polls have also just closed in a few other key races that we are watching tonight. Polls have just closed in the New York City mayor's race. The nation's largest city choosing a new mayor. Mayor Bill de Blasio is done. He will be succeeded by either Eric Adams or Curtis Sliwa. Polls, again, have just closed at this point in time. That race is considered too early to call. We're also watching mayoral races in the great cities of Minneapolis tonight and Buffalo, New York. In Minneapolis, it's the incumbent mayor, Jacob Frey, who's trying for a second term. In Buffalo, the incumbent mayor there, Byron Brown, was actually beaten in the Democratic primary back in June. He is nevertheless trying to retain his seat, trying to get a fifth term as mayor of Buffalo in a write-in campaign as an incumbent, which is a weird combination of factors. And in terms of other major mayor's races, polls have also closed in the last hour in the great city of Boston. The city is poised to elect the first female mayor ever elected to that office, regardless of whether which of the two runoff candidates wins tonight in Boston. So there's lots still to learn tonight, lots still to watch as the returns come in. But let's go back now to Steve at the big board. I see we are all on Virginia with 63% in overall.
Yeah, and again, you can see about two-thirds in statewide. Right now, the lead for Glenn Youngkin, it continues to be basically 200,000 votes over Terry McAuliffe. What is still outstanding here? What's keeping this thing from being called? Well, I give you a couple things that our decision desk is looking at right now in terms of outstanding vote. Number one, if you zoom in on where the state capital is, Richmond, you can see there's barely any vote in here. This is an overwhelmingly Democratic area. You see Joe Biden getting more than 80% of the vote here last time out. So we know there's going to be a substantial number of Democratic votes here in Richmond. The other thing that's going on is if you take a look at Virginia Beach, we've been talking about this a lot tonight. I keep saying kind of a bellwether county. It doesn't look like too much of one with Youngkin up this much. What's happened in Virginia Beach so far is, again, this is what happened in 2020. What you're seeing here in Virginia Beach right now is just the election day vote. They're still going to count the absentee vote. That's the more Democratic-friendly vote. So the vote still to come in Virginia Beach is going to strongly favor Terry McAuliffe. He could pick up some more votes. Certainly he could pick up quite a bit through that. So Virginia Beach, there's an absentee vote to come. Another big county right here, Chesterfield County, we've talked about a lot, right outside of Richmond also. No absentee vote has been counted yet. The rest of the vote that's counted here in Chesterfield County will strongly favor Terry McAuliffe. And also, obviously, big piece still to come. We keep talking about Fairfax. Here, it's mainly same-day vote that's still to come. Now, the same-day vote here still will be Democratic. The problem for McAuliffe is right now it's just not as Democratic as what you're seeing on your screen. So far, McAuliffe is leading in Fairfax County overall by this margin. But in just the same-day portion of the vote in Fairfax County, and that's mainly the vote that's still being tabulated here, he's running about 10 points lower than this. So the bottom line is when you factor that in, if you kind of extrapolate that out, and if you kind of extrapolate out the trends we're seeing everywhere in the places I just talked about, you could see McAuliffe, taking 125,000 or so votes out of that Youngkin lead, but he'd still be 75,000 short, and Youngkin is still adding votes in a lot of these rural areas of the state. Small pockets here and there, but they do add up. So for McAuliffe, this is going to come down. This is going to come down considerably as more vote comes in. But to actually get close to Youngkin and potentially overtake him, he would need numbers in the absentee vote still to come in the places I'm talking about here, especially in the absentee vote. He would need And again, some more Youngkin areas just came in. You see now he's north of 200,000. He would just need numbers. We're not seeing him get really anywhere else tonight. So that's what Mcauliffe is up against here right now. Again, Youngkin in those suburbs, and I think we could just show you again. In those suburbs right outside of Washington, D.C., this is where I meant to go, Loudoun County. We are basically all in now in Loudoun County. I believe there is one precinct outstanding in Loudoun County, and this maybe by itself tells the story of the night here. Mcauliffe is going to win it. He's going to win it by basically 10 points. Right now, it's actually 9.9 points. And we said at the start of the night, Youngkin didn't necessarily need to win Loudoun County. He needed to eat into the big gains that the Democrats made during the Trump era. Those are the big gains the Democrats made in the Trump era in Loudoun County. They rolled it up to 25 points. Youngkin has cut that more than in half tonight. And if you're a Republican and you can get back in the game that way in Northern Virginia, then the other piece of it is just turn out the vote that Donald Trump was able to turn out. And, I mean, wow, that's the other piece of the story tonight. Just going from one county to another, one small county to another here in Southwest Virginia in particular. Youngkin is meeting and exceeding the Donald Trump total. I'll just take you through a bunch of these right here. Look, Trump 80, Youngkin up to 83 in Grayson County, 80.9, 83.5. A lot of these counties in Southwest Virginia, Trump did much better than, for instance, Mitt Romney had done back in 2012, the last Republican nominee before Trump. It was not necessarily a given that any Republican would come in and keep getting that high of a vote, but Youngkin looks like he's even driven it up further. So that combination that Youngkin needed tonight, we are absolutely seeing that in these results. And again, we just kind of reset statewide here, 207,000, basically exactly two-thirds in right now.
And so, Steve, again, just taking sort of a bigger picture look at it, and you're better at this math than I am, but sort of synthesizing everything that you've just said, it sort of seems like what we've seen is a shift toward the compared to 2020. We're seeing a shift, a steady shift toward the Republican, basically in every county in the state, except for in Loudoun County, where we're seeing a big shift toward the Republican. And so while Mcauliffe may have been able to still win or get it close to something that looked like a tie by underperforming Biden by a few points in every county in the state, since Biden won by 10 against Trump overall, losing that much ground in one big Democratic-leaning county that has a ton of voters in it, that could potentially be the fatal factor.
I think it's that, and then it's what we're seeing in those, again, that kind of Trump surge area of the state. This might be a good way of illustrating it. I think we have this, and let me just call it up. What you're seeing here, what I'm highlighting is these are the counties that, from Donald Trump's arrival on the scene in 2016 through the 2020 election, that swung the hardest toward Donald Trump. These are basically the counties where Trump brought new people into the Republican Party. So voters that the Republican Party didn't have before, Trump brought them in. And this was the other question tonight. Could Youngkin keep them? And I think there was somewhat of an open question here, but Youngkin is, look at this, he's absolutely keeping those voters tonight, sometimes by dramatic margins in one county after another. So I think the map has changed here a little bit in Virginia. I think we were talking about this. We were taking a look at this sort of from the standpoint of, hey, you know, could Youngkin roll this thing back to where it was before Donald Trump came along in Northern Virginia? The answer to that is kind of no. Loudoun, as you say, is his best one. He still is not going to roll it back to where it was in 2012. You know, in 2012, Mitt Romney was within 4.5 points in Loudoun County. Tonight, Youngkin's going to lose this probably by 10 points. So we didn't even get back to Mitt Romney numbers, and I don't have to remind you, Mitt Romney lost Virginia in 2012. So what's happened here is Youngkin has eaten in somewhat to what Donald Trump's deficit was in Northern Virginia, and then he has supplemented it with these significant, and they do add up. I know each one I show is very small here, you know, 5,000, 10,000 people. They add up. He's supplemented that with Trump-level support in the rural parts of the state, and that is adding up to this Youngkin lead you're seeing.
That is fascinating. Let's bring into the conversation now Larry Sabado. He is director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics. He's known for his crystal ball predictions of political races. Just before the election that we're looking at tonight, Mr. Sabado and his crew changed this to a lean Republican prediction on this race. Mr. Sabado, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for making time.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks so much.
I want to ask you, I'll warn you in advance, I want to ask you a little bit about what's going on in the House of Delegates tonight, because if Glenn Youngkin is potentially going to pull this out and be the new Republican governor of Virginia, whether or not he's able to govern with Republican Party principles, well, the legislature will have a lot to do with that. I'm going to ask you about that in a moment. But looking at the governor's race and this top-line marquee race, what do you think the story is here tonight thus far?
The story is, I'm not going to call it a blowout because we don't have the final numbers, but I will tell you, somebody in high up in McAuliffe's camp, who was there with McAuliffe, put it this way to me about an hour ago: it's a bloodbath. And so far, everything we've seen pretty much falls along that line. And while we don't have complete figures, anything close to complete figures for the House of Delegates, you could guess based on what I've just said.
Given the distance that Republicans had to come in order to pull this off tonight, I'm struck that it has been 12 years since a Republican has won a statewide race in Virginia, going back to 2005. Of the 14 major statewide races there have been in Virginia, 13 of the 14 have been won by Democrats. What had to change in order to make this possible tonight?
Well, first, Donald Trump left office. He was the greatest producer of Democratic votes in modern history. But of course, the Democrats started winning in 2008 with President Obama's first term. So it was more than Donald Trump, but Donald Trump supercharged it. And, let's be honest, President Biden's ratings, even in Virginia, which he carried by a little over 10%, are 42, 43, 44%. That is not good news for a Democratic nominee running for governor. And on top of that, the clown show in Washington on Capitol Hill, the Democrats couldn't get it together. If they had gotten the two bills passed in September, Mcauliffe would have had something to campaign with, and he could have sold very specific items. He knows how to do it. He's a great salesman. He had nothing, and he was given all kinds of promises, as everybody else was, by Democratic leaders on Capitol Hill, and we all know where it is. Nowhere, at least to this point. So it's certainly too late to help Mcauliffe. So, I'd say those are two big points in favor. And then you have the issues that Youngkin was running on. You may have the same view I have of critical race theory, which is it was a phony issue. It certainly is in Virginia, where it isn't taught. But people believe what they want to believe. We're still in the Trump era, right? You don't have to have the facts backing you up. If people want to believe what you say, they will believe it.
It strikes me that the other option that the Democrats had in terms of making their case to voters here is to run on what they've been able to do with their control of Virginia state government over the past couple of years, getting 500,000 Virginians health insurance who didn't have it before, backing up voting rights, backing up abortion rights, backing up a woman's right to get contraception, doing other things that are playing the other side of some of these culture war issues, but also have a real practical impact in terms of people's lives. If Glenn Youngkin is going to be a Republican governor in Virginia, if he is going to pull this out tonight, the legislature is going to be an interesting factor. The state Senate is not up tonight. The House of Delegates is. Democrats have had a 5-vote majority in that 100-seat body. How are the Republicans doing in their efforts to try to take over that House of the legislature tonight? And what might that mean if Youngkin is elected?
I've only seen early returns for most of the critical swing House of Delegates districts, but if Youngkin ends up winning by a decent margin, 3, 4, 5 points, or maybe it's more than that, the odds are very, very good that he will pull in a Republican majority in the House of Delegates, because we live in a highly partisan, polarized era, and people start at the top voting for a governor of one party, and they usually stay in that column until they're finished with the ballot. So I'd say the odds are pretty good, not certain, haven't seen enough returns to be able to tell you that. Let's assume, rightly or wrongly, that the Republicans get a majority in the House of Delegates. It's true what you said, the state Senate is not up this year, but the state Senate's very close. It's 21-19 Democratic. However, there is at least one Democrat who votes with Republicans on a number of issues, including, by the way, abortion rights. Again, if Youngkin wins by a decent majority, as he appears to be doing early, he could pull in the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor. So then you got the tie-breaking vote with Youngkin, in addition to potentially one Democratic senator who, at least on some issues, will vote with the 19 Republicans. So there you go. It's amazing how things potentially, if the elections are called the way we're talking about, potentially one night can change the entire coloration of a government in a state. And some of this matters, obviously, for 2022 when 36 governors are up and loads of legislative seats.
Yeah, and it could mean huge changes in the state in terms of the policies that affect Virginians' lives in short order. Larry Sabado, director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics. Huge night in Virginia politics. Thank you for helping us understand.
We are going to bring into our conversation our colleague, Chris Jansing. She's at Mcauliffe headquarters. Chris, I'm hearing that they're still looking for some of the outstanding vote, and they're also in touch with reality, not sounding particularly hopeful at this point.
Yeah, I was just in touch with somebody who's very close to Mcauliffe, and I asked him what the mood was in the room, and he answered in one word, glum. Now, he also said they do still believe there's a path, whether they can overperform in some of the votes still to come in Fairfax County. And in fact, Nicole, just about 2 or 3 minutes ago, a senior official within the Mcauliffe campaign came over to tell me, we still believe this is too close to call. We think that there are still ways for us to make up this vote difference. Having said that, we've been talking for the 4 days that I've been here about this enthusiasm gap, and I certainly have seen it on the ground when I've gone to Youngkin campaign events. They have been louder. They have been much larger than the ones run by Terry Mcauliffe. And in fact, who would have thought even a couple of weeks ago that Glenn Youngkin would come into what had been deeply blue Loudoun County, where Joe Biden won by 25 points and Governor Northam won by almost 20 points, and have his final campaign rally. And then he was very loose out this morning shooting hoops at a middle school. So this is obviously not where they wanted or even expected to be. I will say that they are looking less, many of the Democrats I talked to close to Terry Mcauliffe, at this whole issue of education. They realize that it played a big role in this, but they're also very disappointed at what's going on in Washington. They think that the Democratic voters and many of those important swing voters looked at that as well. And so they are really looking at what was for them, they thought, an uphill battle, because people are looking for change. They're not happy about what they're seeing. Nicole?
Chris Jansing, MSNBC's senior national correspondent, who you've been really ear to the ground in Virginia all day long. Thank you so much for being part of our coverage. I want to bring in our colleague Garrett Hake, who's at Youngkin headquarters. Garrett, I talked to a Washington strategist who said that the real turning point for the Youngkin side, when the Mo really flipped and never came back, was when Terry Mcauliffe made that comment at the debate about parents not having I don't want to misquote him, but the role that parents should play in education and curriculum, that Youngkin jumped on that. Some might say he distorted it and exploited it, but that in terms of the momentum and the energy on the race, that was when the Youngkin campaign really set its sights on places like Loudoun, and that was when they see this turning in their direction.
Yeah, I think that's right. That'll be a pivotal moment, but my sources in and around the campaign actually think the momentum started to shift their way even earlier than that. They saw it change around the time of the pullout from Afghanistan, where Biden's numbers, the president's numbers, started to get soft. And as the president's approval numbers ticked down, so too did every Democrat in the state of Virginia. They felt like it gave them an opportunity to try to exploit, to try to raise their guy up. The education issue obviously became huge, both from that moment in the debate and the kind of dual-track campaign strategy that the Youngkin campaign used. If you watch broadcast television in the D.C. market or anywhere else in Virginia, you're seeing ads from Glenn Youngkin about education. They talk about hiring teachers and investing in public education. If you're watching cable news on the right, you're hearing education talked about in terms of critical race theory and race issues in schools. Of course, critical race theory not taught in Virginia schools. The education issue was a Rorschach test for Virginia voters, and it played big, I think, as we're seeing in the exit polls, certainly from the supporters of Glenn Youngkin that I've been speaking to. The other thing that I've heard from the Youngkin campaign is they think that Terry McAuliffe fundamentally misread this race. That Terry McAuliffe is running a nationalized campaign, talking about Donald Trump, and really trying to make Glenn Youngkin, as McAuliffe said on the stump, as we heard from other Democratic circuits, into Donald Trump in khakis and a fleece vest. And they think McAuliffe essentially failed to make that connection. And that gave independent voters, maybe moderate Republicans who turned their back on the party during the Trump years, a hall pass, effectively, to vote for Youngkin and to not be embarrassed about it. And that generated the kind of momentum and the kind of energy that has them feeling tonight, the Youngkin camp does, like they've got this just about sewn up.
Garrett Haake, I can hear there's some energy, at least in the room. Not sure we can extrapolate that across the state. We're still watching and waiting, but I appreciate your reporting. Rachel, this point that Garrett makes about the turning point for Biden is something I picked up from pollsters that poll just independents, not Democratic, not Republicans. And when I sort of set out in September to understand where this president was, I heard sort of three analyses. I shared this with you guys in the break, that he lost independent voters and women around the pullout from Afghanistan. And I said at the time I thought 95% of the public was for leaving, but it turns out a whole lot of the public did not like the way we left, and especially some of that softer part of the Biden coalition that came and voted for him in 2020, but was always going to be watching the news. They were always going to be sensitive voters. They were always going to be, and not, sticking their finger in there, but they were always going to be watching. They were going to be watching and seeing how he performed, seeing how the vaccines rolled out, or seeing what happened. I don't know that anyone predicted Afghanistan would weigh in with those voters, but according to people who poll sort of center-right to independence, that was really damaging for him. And Garrett pointing that out is the first time I've heard someone report it out from inside the Youngkin side. The other piece was this frustration about the lack of fire. Why not fight for voting rights? Why not give speeches about, there was one speech given. One speech about democracy. It was beautiful. It was in Philadelphia, but no one's touched it since. Yep. And what is happening in sort of Republican America, it's not just critical race theory. It's saying, fraud happened. There people believe there was fraud, so they're fixing it. So Republican voters think Republicans are fake. Never mind that it's fake.
That's right.
Critical race theory isn't taught. It means something different to voters. They think it is. So Republicans are fixing it. Youngkin's going to ban it. And some of it is just a question for Democrats now. Do you adjust to a terrain that is not fair, that is not just, that is all fact-based? But at this tonight looks like it advantages Republicans.
Well, the way that you confront and defeat an opponent that has framed things in a way that is fake is that, yes, you can create your own competing fake framework and run on that. Or you can accomplish real things and then run on that and say, yes, these guys have invented a boogeyman about a form of racial hierarchy that you've fantasized into existence that isn't actually taught in schools. But look, you have a child tax credit and you have the biggest climate change legislation that's ever been passed in this country. And we have an infrastructure bill, and all of the terrible traffic problems in Virginia are going to get fixed because Republicans are talking about fantasy stuff and Democrats are talking about real things.
Who has done that successfully ever? Other than in a Sorkin movie. I mean, I've just never seen that campaign.
I'm sorry. I mean, interrupt you, because I think the other alternative is that I think you hit on the word that I think is the most important. It's fight. It's that you not only have to fight for what you believe in, but you have to be seen to be fighting.
Yes.
And the problem is the only part of the Democratic Party right now that is visibly fighting for people, the base of the party that votes for them, because yes, independents are important, but you need your base. And the progressives in the House are the only ones who are showing fight. The Democrats in Texas that walked out and flew and went all the way out of town and flew to D.C. and were like, we're not going to be there. We're walking out of here. Fight. If you're not seen to be fighting, the other way you respond to a fake campaign that is racially based is that you need to be seen fighting for those same voters. And Democrats, I never saw them fight for them. They didn't fight for criminal justice reform. They did not fight for voting reform. Have they lifted a finger to make sure that people of color are going to be able to vote? Fight. And they don't know how to do that and to communicate that we care enough to fight and to actually take risks. What the progressives did, even though they were getting bullied by the conservatives in their party and run over by people like Manchin and Sinema, is they said, we're going to hold up this bill. You want this thing so badly, you ain't getting it, because we're fighting for the other bill because that's our base.
On substance. We're fighting for something.
But you got to show you're fighting.
The problem is
Fight
Biden has a 43% approval rating because they're fighting. And I guess at the end of the day, Democrats have to decide if they want to fight and lose or if they want to reassemble the Obama coalition, the Biden coalition, and the Clinton coalition, which were winning campaigns.
But isn't the problem that part of the Obama coalition, unfortunately, there are a lot of Americans who don't want to deal with the history. They don't want to deal with it. And they might have voted for Obama, but they're in that coalition too. But when confronted with the opportunity to say, who really was Thomas Jefferson? They don't want to. And so they'll leave the coalition in a heartbeat. The people who stay with you are your base, and they don't think you're lifting a finger for them.
Yeah.
So it's hard to convince them to come out and vote.
I can tell you right now that we have a little bit of news, which is that NBC News now projects that Eric Adams will be the next mayor of New York City. Mayor Bill de Blasio has just completed his term. Eric Adams, the Brooklyn borough president, was up against a Republican named Curtis Sliwa, who ran on a number of issues. He made his largest headlines in the campaign for letting everybody know that he had a very large number of cats. Very large number of cats. He brought a cat to a polling place today. He was also hit by a taxi cab during the campaign, but Curtis Sliwa was not able to parlay those advantages into a win in heavily Democratic New York City. Eric Adams will be the next mayor of the nation's largest city. All right, we're going to take a quick break right now. Our friend Chris Hayes is going to be joining us when we come back. We're going to be checking it back in with Steve Kornacki as we watch those two governor's races that are not yet called tonight. As we watch the results come in there, stay with us. It is just about 9:30 on the East Coast right now. We do have a projection to make. This is the Ohio 15th Congressional District. This is a seat that was vacated in May, a surprise resignation from a moderate Republican congressman named Steve Stivers. Running tonight to succeed Steve Stivers, Republican Mike Carey and Democratic State Representative Allison Russo. There was a late endorsement for Russo from President Biden in this race, but this is a fairly heavily Republican district. This is a district that Trump won by 14-plus points. NBC News now projects that the winner in Ohio 15 will be the Republican lobbyist, Mike Carey, who's running for that seat. This follows our earlier call earlier this evening in the 11th Congressional District in Ohio. This is a district that was vacated when Representative Marcia Fudge left to become HUD Secretary in President Biden's cabinet. That's a Cleveland area district that's very heavily Democratic. And tonight, Chantel Brown is the Congresswoman-elect to succeed Marcia Fudge in that district. I want to welcome our friend Chris Hayes to the set. Chris, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here, my friend.
Great to see you as well. You know, that's a +1 in the House margin with Chantel Brown's election.
Oh, that's right,
tonight,
because the Republican seat stays Republican in that one, right?
That was just unoccupied, which, when you're dealing with a 4-vote margin, I think is what the House Dems are at right now, is not nothing.
Yeah,
actually.
Okay. Even if it is a D plus 50.
Yes, it's not. No, it's not a swing. It was never in doubt. It's just that there's going to be some. You know, right now there's some very treacherous negotiating and navigating that Nancy Pelosi has to do, so she's got one more.
Let me just check in terms of where we are right now. NBC News just projected that the winner of the New York City mayor's race will be Eric Adams. We are expecting Eric Adams to give his victory speech shortly. We're going to dive into that as soon as that's happening. I want to let you know I may interrupt you for that at any moment because I want to hear that speech. Steve Kornacki is watching results as they come in tonight. Steve, can we talk about both New Jersey and Virginia in terms of those governor's races? Both of them, neither of them has a call at this point.
Yeah, that's right. And again, you see now 3/4 of the vote here in Virginia statewide. We've just been saying now for a while, it's been stuck at about 200,000, Youngkin's margin over Mcauliffe. Again, we do expect this is going to tighten pretty significantly. I just read off, Fairfax County, we got a ton left to come in terms of some same-day vote there. Chesterfield County, just south of Richmond, we've got absentee vote. Virginia Beach, we've got absentee vote. Prince William County, big Democratic county here, D.C. metro area, again, again, it's absentee vote. It's the most Democratic vote, Democratic-friendly vote there is out there. Long way of saying, just from what I just gave you right there, just from that, you could see Mcauliffe netting, let's say, 75,000 votes. So that would take a chunk out of what Youngkin's got there. There are some other areas like that there. It's just hard right now to look at what else is left on this list and to get it up to anywhere near 202,000. You could certainly take a big bite out of that, certainly with what we see is left here. But McAuliffe's going to have to find a way to take an even bigger bite to actually overtake Youngkin. So that's the situation in Virginia. If you take a look in New Jersey right now, a quarter of the vote is in. You see the Democratic incumbent Phil Murphy. This is 4 points right now. Now, keep in mind what you're seeing. There's two things here. A lot of the vote that you're seeing so far here is from Ocean County. You see Ocean County. This is one of the biggest Republican vote-producing counties anywhere, frankly. 3/4 of the vote is in Ocean County. You can see Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican, leading Murphy 2-1. Not a huge surprise right there. Trump won this thing by almost 30 points. Ciattarelli's doing a few points better. So Ocean County right now is going a long way to driving that statewide number you just saw. Also, Monmouth County, which, we expect this as well to be a Republican county, not as Republican as Ocean County. In fact, it was very competitive in the 2020 presidential election. So Ciattarelli, again, running better than Trump's number here in Monmouth County. He's going to have to run significantly better, 8 to 10 points better than Trump kind of across the board to have a shot at winning in New Jersey. So Monmouth and Ocean are going a long way to driving the number here that you're seeing statewide. Meanwhile, if you take a look, Essex County, this is one of the biggest counties in the state. This is the biggest Democratic vote-producing county in the state. I think you basically just have the mail-in vote here in Essex County, so you can expect a lot more votes here. That's a big Murphy stronghold. You take a look at Bergen County. Bergen County, kind of a bellwether county here. It votes kind of the way New Jersey votes. We don't have much in there. This is the largest county in the state, though, so we really don't have much from Bergen County at all right now. A couple other places we can show you. Mercer County, this is where Trenton is. Again, this would be a big Democratic county, give you a sense of it. Joe Biden got almost 70% of the vote here. We really don't have much in here from Mercer County so far. So the vote that's in right now also, I think, skewing this a bit. Hunterdon County, this is a core Republican county. We're getting close to 100% here. Again, this thing actually got close. Trump over Biden by 5 points here in 2020. That's a really bad showing for a Republican in Hunterdon. Ciattarelli is moving that up 9 points. He's getting that done in Hunterdon County. The question is he able to do that in like a Bergen County? Is he able to get that kind of a shift in Bergen County? Another one to keep an eye on where we don't have any vote right now is Burlington County, South Jersey. This is another one that is sort of a bellwether. It votes kind of the same way the statewide vote goes. We don't have anything going here. Question is, can Ciattarelli be improving on Trump's number, again, by 8, 9, 10 points in a place like Bergen County? It's one thing to do it in Hunterdon County, traditionally Republican county. It's another thing if he can do it in a Bergen or a Burlington. Again, not much of the way in the way of votes there right now. The vote that's in so far is skewed pretty heavily toward Republican areas. Plus, we just have a lot of mail here in some of these other places. So I would take that margin you're seeing right there with a grain of salt. Let's see what we get when Bergen starts to report. Let's see what we get when Burlington starts to report. Keeping a close eye on those, and we'll keep you updated here.
Yeah, New Jersey, I mean, in terms of keeping the context in mind here, President Biden, as Steve was saying, won New Jersey plus 16 over Donald Trump. But Phil Murphy himself was first elected after the Bridgegate scandal, and he won by 14 points over Kim Guadagno, and he won that seat. So while New Jersey residents have not proven willing to re-elect Democratic governors at any time since 1977, Murphy would seem to have the wind in his sails for this.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously too early to do big analysis in New Jersey and Virginia because these are always the two big races on this night because of when they're happen. But, you go back to 2009, and of course the big story on that night was Bob McDonnell and Chris Christie, right? The Republicans flipping both of those. Christie, obviously the bigger upset because New Jersey is a deep blue state. But let's imagine a universe, plausibly in which in both states Republicans outperform Donald Trump by 10 points, right? To the extent that's true, you got to look at macro issues more than you're looking at what ads which candidates are running and what the campaign was. A lot of the focus, particularly because Virginia is in the heart of the nation's political media capital, is very focused on what was the messaging and what were the campaigns and education and all that stuff matters in campaigns. The macro environment matters a lot, too. And to the extent that we're seeing similar benchmarks, you can run 10 points ahead of Donald Trump and lose the New Jersey election and win the Virginia one if you're just a generic Republican. To the extent you're seeing similar kinds of driving factors, you got to look to the macro environment that's driving that politically more than the specifics of who cut what ad and who said what at a
What was
debate.
the difference in the macro environment now versus November?
Well,
a year ago.
I think there's a huge difference. I think the story is that there was a real hope the virus was going to be suppressed and life was going to get back to normal. And basically through July, it looked like that was happening, and then it wasn't happening. It just wasn't happening. Like, inflation is higher than it's been in recent memory, and the GDP of the country slowed down to only 0.5% growth in the third quarter, and there's 800,000, nearly 800,000 people have died.
But things have reopened. The Delta variant, the wave from the Delta variant is coming down. There are some variables that are moving in the right direction at this point.
And the exit polls showed that which was interesting, that the coronavirus or that the virus was a very
low
was not
salience.
importance to many of the voters
which
there.
was fascinating.
It was education,
right,
which is code for white parents don't like the idea of teaching about race. And unfortunately, race is just the most palpable tool in the toolkit. It used to be of the Democratic Party back in the day when there were Dixiecrats, and now of the Republican Party. It just is powerful.
I don't disagree with that, but I also think that, the other thing that happens here is just the thermostatic public opinion, which is a term coined by a political scientist in 1955, which is the reason that Virginia has, the big exception to the rule in Virginia was McAuliffe's 2013 win, It had gone opposite the party in power in the White House out of 12 times, 11 times. McAuliffe is the one thing. And that's because what tends to happen, and you see it in the midterms in the New Deal with FDR, that the party in power
gets a backlash.
Faces a backlash.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is it's almost like gravity, So there's lots of things that can be done in individual races above and beyond that. But the thing that's pulling on all of these atoms as they circle around is that.
Yeah.
In addition to the top of the ticket races in New Jersey and Virginia, one thing to watch in Virginia tonight, I mentioned this a couple of times, and I want to sort of bring this home, is that every single seat in Virginia's House of Delegates is up for election tonight. There's 100 seats in the Virginia House of Delegates. They're all up tonight. Before today, Democrats had a majority, 55. Republicans had 45 of those seats. That means that Republicans need to take 6 of those seats tonight back to regain the majority. That's, should be noted, the same number that Democrats flipped their way just 2 years ago in 2019. So far tonight, Republican candidates lead in several of the key toss-up races, likely to determine control, and the Republicans do appear at least on the cusp of taking back control. If Glenn Youngkin is now going to be the Republican governor of Virginia, and again, that race is not called, and the Democrats and the McAuliffe campaign reportedly say they still see a path, but if Youngkin is going to end up being a Republican governor, there is a 1-seat majority effectively for the Democrats in the state Senate, and one of those Democrats is, as Larry Sabado was saying, a Democratic state senator who is more than happy to vote with Republicans a lot of the time. If Republicans are also going to get control of the Virginia State House of Delegates, that's going to be a sea change in terms of governance and policy in Virginia all in one night. Joining us right now is somebody for whom this is a very, very, very key question. She is Virginia's House Majority Leader, Charnell Herring. She represents the great city of Alexandria. She was just reelected tonight. Congratulations. I should also tell you that Ms. Herring is the first African-American woman from Northern Virginia ever elected to the Virginia legislature. Representative Herring, it is great to see you here tonight. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you so much for having me.
So give us your take on how this night is going for you. You being reelected, you will be back in post, you and a number of your colleagues. The specific number is very important, though, in terms of whether or not Democrats are going to continue to govern in Virginia.
Oh, no, absolutely. But it's early now still. Results are still coming in. I feel good. I've been traveling across the Commonwealth the past month, and the energy for Democrats is strong. We're turning out the vote. We've had record number of absentee voting in Virginia, and that's one of our successes. We expanded voting rights here in Virginia. We protected women's reproductive health care. We fought for clean energy, and we expanded clean energy. And Rachel, 2 years in a row, we've been named best place to do business, while at the same time expanding workers' rights. So we feel very good tonight.
In terms of running on that record, all the nonsense coming from people like us and the national media covering this governor's race tonight have been all about how national dynamics come into play here. The former president comes into play. Feelings about the current president come into play. Very little discussion about whether or not Democrats should have or could have been running more on what you all have been able to do since you've held the reins with full Democratic control of the state government over the last couple of years. Do you feel like that record should have been more front page, should have been more of the story of this election rather than everybody trying to make this a national story?
Right. Right, exactly. Well, I will tell you, we have been talking voters face to face. My members have been sending mailers and newsletters and keeping up with their constituents. And that's what's key, is that grassroots, face-to-face communication. So while it may not have made front page news, we have been working the ground for 2 years. And so that's why I feel good tonight.
In terms of how this is going to resolve over the course of the evening, if there is going to be a shift in the governor's, in the State House, if there is going to be a shift and we are going to have a Republican governorship in Virginia going ahead, and I don't want to get ahead of the numbers, but we are watching these numbers, and NBC does say that Glenn Youngkin is in the lead tonight. How do you expect that you and your fellow Democrats in the legislature may be able to work with him?
And I'm sorry you cut out. Look, Youngkin may be in the lead right now, but all the votes have not been counted. So we're going to just continue to stay the course. We'll wait for all the votes to come in, but we still believe that Virginia is a progressive state, and that we have governed well, and that we will continue to govern well.
Virginia House Majority Leader Charnell Herring joining us live from Virginia as she has just been reelected to the State House of Delegates. Charnell Herring, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, so we are still watching those results come in. We are going to take a quick break. As I said, we are still waiting for a victory speech tonight from Eric Adams, who is going to be the next mayor of the great American city of New York. He has defeated Curtis Sliwa tonight and will be New York's next mayor. We're expecting his victory speech momentarily. We're also still looking for more returns on both these governor's races that we are watching tonight, New Jersey and Virginia. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special election night coverage here on MSNBC. It is still too close to call with Republican Glenn Youngkin in the lead in the Virginia governor's race. As you can see there, about 81% of the vote in and just under 200,000 votes separating Youngkin and Mcauliffe right now, about 184,000 votes between them. In the New Jersey governor's race, this is considered to be too early to call. You see about a third of the vote in there, and the candidate's very, very tight. But that is considered to be too early to call, which is different than too close to call. In terms of some of the other results that we are following tonight, I can tell you that the Associated Press has just projected that Detroit's incumbent mayor, Mike Dugan, will be reelected this evening. The Associated Press has also projected that in the closely watched Manhattan DA's race, which has national implications that you can imagine in just a moment, we'll talk about in just a moment, Alvin Bragg will be the next district attorney in Manhattan. The reason that has national implications is in part because of the existing ongoing criminal case brought by the previous Manhattan DA against President Trump's business. Including felony charges against both his business and the chief financial officer of that business. That prosecution will now be in the lap of Alvin Bragg as that DA's office makes its transition to its new elected DA. I should also tell you, we've been watching an interesting ballot question in Minneapolis. Minneapolis voters tonight considering whether their police department should be replaced with a Department of Public Safety with a broader and sort of more holistic remit. And right now, with just over 70% of the vote in Minneapolis, it looks like that measure is behind, 16-point gap between those voting no and those voting yes, with the noes out ahead. But we'll be watching that in Minneapolis. That's super interesting. That's also happening, of course, alongside Minneapolis's Mayor Jacob Frey, facing a large slate of challengers as he tries to get reelected to a second term. In terms of the mayoral race in New York City, NBC News has projected that Eric Adams will be the next mayor of New York City. We are still waiting for his victory speech, which we expect any moment now. His raucous campaign headquarters has been sort of having a great time since this was projected pretty soon after poll closings. But we'll watch to see Eric Adams make his victory speech. When that comes up, we'll bring that to you. But Steve Kornacki has had his finger on the pulse in terms of these two governor's races that we have been watching. Steve, let's talk first about Virginia, where we are with Youngkin versus Mcauliffe.
Yeah, Rachel, it continues to be a similar story to what we've been talking about with Glenn Youngkin's lead. You see now, it's fallen a little bit. It was 200,000 the last time we checked in. Now it's 184,000. It's fallen just a little, but now we're over 80% of the vote is in statewide. And again, basically what we've been waiting on here is there are some of the bigger counties in the state had absentee vote and still do have absentee vote to be reported. The absentee vote is the most Democratic friendly. So again, you would expect Youngkin to be, you expect Mcauliffe to be making up a significant amount of ground here. But again, even when you give Mcauliffe, I was just running the numbers right here, when you give Mcauliffe Biden levels of support with the absentee vote that we know to be out in places like Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Chesterfield County, south of Richmond, if you just say, hey, he's going to get the same number Joe Biden did, which would be very good for Terry McAuliffe with that absentee vote. Even when you do that, he's still not making up 184,000 votes. There's still a significant gap there, about 50,000 or so for Youngkin. There are also still some Republican-friendly areas of the state that are also still reporting vote out, so opportunities still exist for Youngkin to build on his lead as well. So again, waiting to see these big chunks come in here, but they'd have to be massively big and kind of out of whack with what we've been seeing elsewhere in the state tonight for McAuliffe to have a shot here. So McAuliffe continues to trail here, running out of votes left in Virginia. Meanwhile, I will put up New Jersey, and again, you see there's just over a third of the vote in right now, and you see Phil Murphy, the Democratic incumbent, ahead by just 6,000 votes over Jack Ciattarelli, trying to get a handle on exactly how to read this right now. It's a little complicated. I'll show you why.
Wait, let me interrupt you just for a second to tell you that the NBC News characterization on this race, Steve, is that it is still too early to call, but that Phil Murphy leads. That characterization was just changed. I don't know if that impacts at all the way you're looking at this.
Yeah, no, that's pretty consistent with this. What I would say is this. Take a look at like Hunterdon County. I think we showed this a minute ago. Most of the vote, just about all the vote is in Hunterdon County. And you see here, Trump got 51, Ciattarelli basically at 61. And Ciattarelli needs to be showing about 8 to 10 point improvement over Trump in every county, just on average, if he's going to pull this out. So that's an encouraging one there for Ciattarelli. You take a look here, Monmouth County now 83% of the vote is in. Let's compare it. 50 to, again, 10 points. So this, when you see Monmouth, when you see Hunterdon, it starts to get a little interesting in terms of, is he getting those kinds of numbers? You take a look at Gloucester County here, now in South Jersey, there's improvement here. It's only a 6-point improvement with 85% of the vote in. We can go next door to Atlantic County, still a little bit early in the Atlantic County count. So there are some areas here right now where Ciattarelli is putting up some very good numbers. The problem for him becomes, you take a look here, Essex County, where Newark is. This is the biggest Democratic vote-producing county. We don't even have 20% in. There's going to be a lot of Democratic votes still to come here. Hudson County right next door. Again, core Democratic county. This is where Jersey City is, for instance. And again, look at that. A ton of votes still to come in here. You could even take a look at Union County. This is another big Democratic county, only 25% in. There are some big remaining pockets here of Democratic vote. Even Mercer County, down where Trenton is, pretty good-sized place. You see Murphy only up 6 right there, but early. Again, what I want to see here in New Jersey, we've got 13% now in Bergen County. Bergen County is the one I want to see a substantial amount of vote in, because if this could hold in Bergen County, if Chitterelli could continue to, you see 41% for Trump. Chitterelli's doing 11 points better than Trump right now in Bergen County. If that could hold, that's the kind of improvement that Chitterelli needs in. Bergen County is the largest county in the state. There's 1 million people there, and it's typically, pretty much a bellwether county. Not always, but usually as Bergen goes, so goes the state. I want to see Bergen, and the other one I want to see where we have no vote so far is Burlington County in South Jersey. And again, Burlington County, I think, is a lot like Bergen County. This was the result in Burlington County in the 2020 presidential election. That's not far off what the statewide result was in New Jersey. Is Chitterelli getting is he getting 49, 50%? Is he ever winning a Burlington County? Those are big, big lifts for a Republican candidate. If he could do that in Bergen, if he could do that in Burlington, especially with what's to come in these core Democratic areas. And some of them in some areas that have a more Republican vote history so far, we've seen Chitterelli putting up some good numbers, but we got to see, first of all, how many votes exactly the Democrats squeeze out of Essex, where Newark is, Hudson. We also got to see Bergen and Burlington. That's really what I'm looking for right now.
And Steve, is this in New Jersey, is this the sort of thing where when we've got 13% of votes out and stuff from these individual counties, we know what kind of votes those are? That's the distinction it's been so important in Virginia.
Right, the mail-in vote. Now, New Jersey is a little different than Virginia, too, I should say, where the absentee vote in New Jersey, there's a lot more of the absentee vote in New Jersey is the mail vote than it is the in-person early vote. In Virginia, it's the other way around. The people who vote absentee are more likely to do the in-person early than to do the mail. And the mail vote tends to be more Democratic friendly. So, for instance, I think we've got a fair chunk of mail vote in Essex County so far. We've also, let's see if we've got this here. I want to see if this was working. Yes, here we go. We've got a mix of it right now in Monmouth County with 83% in. So there's not one dominant type of vote here left in Monmouth County. So if I can get that off the screen. Get that off the screen.
Unplug it and replug it.
One of these days I'm going to learn it. But that's a good sign for Chitterelli within Monmouth County. I don't know what I'm pressing. Okay, that's a good sign for Chitterelli within Monmouth County. But I think the key here is only 13% in Bergen right now. And again, with Chitterelli up there, that wouldn't be the mail vote there, and nothing in Burlington. These are two pretty big ones, especially Bergen. So I think as they go, that's really going to tell us our story.
All right, Steve Kornacki, watching what's coming in New Jersey. Again, the characterization there has just changed in the past couple of minutes. NBC News now projecting that in the New Jersey governor's race, it is still too early to call, but NBC is characterizing this race as being one that Phil Murphy, the incumbent Democratic governor, is leading. Again, one of the things that we're watching for in the next few minutes is that the New York City mayor's race has been called. Eric Adams, who's currently the Brooklyn borough president, is projected to be the next mayor of New York City. This is a shot of his headquarters, where we believe that is him taking the stage. Is he about to give his speech? If he is, I would like to take it if we can.
Mayor for the city of New York, Eric L. Adams!
He's going to crowd surf a little bit here, or if this is going to become a speech soon. Chris, you're closer to the monitor. What's happening?
He's just soaking it in and putting together a kind of rainbow coalition on stage of supporters.
Okay.
An incredibly New York-looking picture all kinds of folks representing all different slices of the incredibly diverse and complicated city that is New York City. And he's, I think, enjoying being the winner right now and taking something of a victory lap. Like, he doesn't seem to be in a rut.
Literally a victory lap. This has been a couple laps around the room and a couple laps around the stage while we've been watching. You know, you never ever get that moment again, which is just before you give your first victory speech as New York City mayor. You only get this moment once in life.
Not only that,
shorten it?
not only that, it's like Christmas Eve. You know, it's better than anything. It's all expectation and hope and possibility. There's no burdens yet. You don't have to run New York City
his
yet.
victory speech is perfect.
And by the way, I would still argue, and no one will ever be able to talk me down from this, New York City mayor is the greatest mayoral job in America. It's the most interesting. It's the most colorful.
And hard as heck.
And it's hard as heck. Just the subway issue alone.
I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, though. You see what it does to people.
Me neither.
You think
Good luck.
presidents get aged by being president?
Oh, New York
Look
City
what
mayor is
happens to
everything.
New York City mayors.
And it's usually been occupied by somebody that's always a little bit interesting.
Yes.
He's only the second black mayor, by the way. I have to say, after
Only
David
number two.
Dinkins, only number 2 in a city that's very diverse.
The team told me to come through the back, come around the stage, come directly in. And they said, this is the way we want you to move. And I said to them, I'm the mayor. And if they only knew the level of energy I get when I walk in your crowd. There are days on this journey when I was just so depleted and tired and just weary. And historically, I was able to just go out to Queens and sit down with mommy, and she would re-energize me. And then when mommy transitioned in April, I will move among you somewhere, at a train station, at the grocery store, walking inside the laundromat, or just going to some of the barber shops late at night in Brownsville and Bed-Stuy, and go inside when they finish cutting hairs, and we just sit there and just talk. You don't know how much you fuel me. You just fuel me every day. And let me tell you the uniqueness about the fuel, that it's a Shakespearean tragedy that many of you don't know. It doesn't matter if you are in Borough Park in Hasidic community, if you're in Flatbush in the Korean community, if you're in Sunset Park in the Chinese community, if you're in Rockaway, if you're out in Queens in the Dominican community, Washington Heights, all of you have that power to fuel us. We are so divided right now, and we're missing the beauty of our diversity. We have to end all of this division of who we are, where we go to worship, what do we wear. No, today we take off the intramural jersey and we put on one jersey, Team New York. So New York City, brothers and sisters, and I just need to pause for a moment because it's so important for me to do this. 5 people I must acknowledge, and I'm going to acknowledge all of you within time, but there's 5 people I must acknowledge. First is my sister, Ingrid Martin. Where's Ingrid? If I can quote one of the most philosophical geniuses of our time, Drake, started from the bottom, now we're here.
You're watching Eric Adams, who is Going to be the next mayor of New York City, only the second African-American mayor in New York City's history. He defeated Republican Curtis Sliwa, a real character in his own right, tonight in order to win the New York City mayoral race. I want to let you know, we just got in a little bit of news. We still don't have a call in the Virginia governor's race. It's characterized right now as being too close to call, with Republican Glenn Youngkin in the lead. But a senior official in the Mcauliffe campaign has just told us that we should expect to hear from Terry Mcauliffe within the next few minutes. We're hearing from the Mcauliffe campaign that their take on this race right now is that there's lots of votes still to count, and so we expect that that will probably be the kind of speech that Terry Mcauliffe is about to give in Virginia, but we shall see. I want to bring back into the conversation now our friend David Plouffe, who was campaign manager for President Barack Obama's 2008 presidential run. He knows what it takes for a Democrat to win statewide in Virginia because he's done it. David, as this story has ripened over the course of the night and the picture has become more clear, what do you feel like Democrats will take away from what's looking like may end up being a split decision between New Jersey and Virginia? And obviously, it looks like it may be disappointment for Democrats in Virginia, both at the governor's race and potentially in the state legislature as well.
Well, Rachel, Matt, most important for people in Virginia is now they may have Republican control, and I think a lot of people in that state are going to see real negative consequences. But listen, the Virginia margin is probably going to be anywhere from 10 to 14 below Biden's margin. My sense in New Jersey, back of the envelope, is maybe you're 10 to 12 points below Biden's margin there, too. So let's remember, Democratic Party in 2020, we won the presidency, won the Senate because of Georgia, but we lost 13 House races when Biden was winning Virginia by 10 and New Jersey by 18. So the conversation you and Chris Hayes were having is interesting. There's unique elements to these races in terms of Virginia and New Jersey, but there's also the national political environment. And I think Democrats need to be clear-eyed and sober that if the race for the House or Senate happened next week and it's not in this national political environment, they probably lose both. I expect that the political environment can and should get better for Democrats a year from now. They're going to have a lot of accomplishments to run on, particularly incumbents, and I think they need to prosecute the case against the Republicans. But I think we should not say, well, this was Virginia or this was New Jersey. Yeah. This is really, really dark and bleak in terms of what this means for next year, unless we turn it around in the next 12 months.
Yeah, David, I wonder how much, there's a few things to jump off that. I wonder how much you think that is the conditions in the country and how much that's messaging. Obviously, as a political professional, you want it to be messaging as much as possible, but my read of this is the most bullish case for Biden and the Democrats is that you pass both elements of the agenda, you get the country vaccinated, you suppress COVID, inflation goes down, supply chains kind of become unkinked, and you have like a good economy and a country that feels back to normal a year from now. And that's more important than any message or ads that you run.
I tend to agree with that, Chris, and as someone who's kind of spent their career in messaging, it's painful to say. But when you've got powerful headwinds or tailwinds, a message can make a difference, but it's not going to overwhelm those things. And so, yeah, maybe it can get worse. I take the bullish view that a year from now, Democrats will have had big accomplishments that they can do storytelling to everybody in America. Republicans would have stood in opposition. The pandemic, hopefully, is either complete in our rearview mirror or endemic. I think it's important at some point the Democratic leaders in the country say 80% of the people have now been vaccinated. 5 to 12-year-olds can start getting the shot tomorrow. We've got to move on here. And that should help the economy. So I'm bullish that the case will get better in the next 12 months in terms of the environment, but it's pretty dark right now. And I think we need to learn a lot about which voters moved in these states and why, both swing and base.
David, I have, this is some stats that Sahil Kapoor, the great Sahil Kapoor, our colleague, just tweeted out. Mcauliffe, he's slightly ahead with non-white voters, so that was not his issue. He's slightly behind with white male voters. That seems fairly typical for a Democrat. He's getting clobbered among white women voters. In 2020, white women voters went 50% for Biden, 49% for Trump. In this election, per the exit polls, they're going 57-43 for Mcauliffe. That is not macro. That's issues. With education being the #1 thing on the minds of these voters, that means that Terry McAuliffe lost a very specific messaging war on race. And so I wonder what would be your advice to Democrats about how they should answer that. Is it a candidate that's different, that is somebody maybe newer, maybe you have a candidate of color, it's just somebody who really knows how to message that? What could they have done differently? Because that is not a good number for them going into next year.
No, it's a massive shift. I will say, Joy, some of it I think is, first of all, Youngkin portrayed himself as not a Trump Republican. Okay, he ran as kind of almost like a Romney Republican for most of the race. Yep. There's no doubt that critical race theory is a weapon that he utilized to great effect. But I think a lot of those white women, they're now gone negative on Joe Biden's job performance. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about the pandemic. We've been, dealing with school issues for a year and a half in terms of kids in school. So I think it's a blend. I think the mistake Democrats would make is to say, we just lost 16 points with white women, which is a massive shift in 12 months, and it's only because of the race Glenn Youngkin ran. I think it's a blend, and I think you have to understand these are big, big warning signs that are blinking as bright as they can.
One more thing on this, on Youngkin and Trump, which I think is an interesting takeaway tonight, David, and I'd be curious to hear what you think. One is Youngkin. Donald Trump blew up so much about our politics that reclaiming the most conventional wisdom pre-Trump feels like some innovation. This is the way Republicans always used to run. They would say it was about education, it was about welfare, it was about a handout. It was, there were these sort of coded appeals that were able to weave together different coalitions. That the guy at the back of the rally with the Confederate flag was there for you, but so was the, relatively affluent suburban mom who doesn't like Donald Trump saying send them back and we're going to ban all the Muslims, right? Like this is not rocket science. This is how Republicans used to run. And I actually wonder the extent to which in Republican political circles, there's an understanding that like Donald Trump, you don't maybe need him in the way that you think you do, given how much the transformation of your base into this kind of very backlashy base right now is going to be there, whether you court him or you don't.
Well, Chris, I think that's true in the general election. I agree with you. It's a very low bar to kind of portray yourself as not Donald Trump.
Yes.
But, right now, I think in most of the United States Senate races that will determine control, I think you'd say maybe with the exception of New Hampshire, the lead candidates right now are Trump-like figures.
Right.
So in the Republican primaries, that gate, I think, still slants in that direction. Yeah. And that's another reason, I think, to be more optimistic about the Democrats is they may nominate a bunch of people who aren't Glenn Youngkin. I can't believe I'm saying like Glenn Youngkin is some like ideal candidate. He's not. But I think they are going to come out of those Senate primaries owning everything, all the Trump, not apologizing for anything. And by the way, someone who came across as less of a moderate voice might not have been able to pull off the critical race theory thing, because they might just come across like a flat-out racist. Okay, I think Youngkin came across as somebody wrongly, in my view, but was able to convince voters, including a lot of those white women voters, that he's not a racist and he thinks race should be taught, but it just shouldn't be this critical race theory, which of course doesn't exist. So I think we have to look very carefully about the type of Republican candidate that comes out of House Republican and Senate primaries next year.
In terms of how things are resolving right now in Virginia, there's still more to learn in terms of how this is breaking down. I know that Steve Kornacki is looking at new data that we've got out of Fairfax. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, we've been talking all night about Fairfax, the biggest county in the state. This is sort of the ultimate test of the Northern Virginia area here. We finally have basically all the vote in Fairfax County. So I think this really does kind of give you a clearer picture of everything we've been talking tonight about what happened in Virginia. Basically all the vote now in Fairfax County. Again, 1 out of every 7 votes cast in Virginia, cast in Fairfax. Mcauliffe, 64.4%. Youngkin, 35%. A margin of a little under 30% for Terry McAuliffe. I mean, this is the story of the night right here, because this is what it looked like in 2020. Donald Trump won Virginia, Joe Biden won Virginia by 10 points. Big reason Joe Biden had such a big margin statewide. He won by far the largest county by 42 points. Tonight, that margin is falling to about 29 points. McAuliffe over Youngkin. So we said the Youngkin campaign's goal in a place like Fairfax County was probably to get it to about 33, 34. They're going to land at 35%. And again, if you had told them at the start of the night. You're getting 35 in Fairfax. They'd be ecstatic. So we have a much more complete picture of Northern Virginia right now. We talked about the question at the start of the night: could Youngkin win back some of the voters lost by Donald Trump? He did in Fairfax. He improved 7 points over Donald Trump. He did in Loudoun County next door. We've talked about this. He's going to improve 8 points in Loudoun County over Donald Trump. Take a look closer here. Prince William County, we are still waiting on Prince William County. This is one of those places where the absentee vote is still to come. And we can see in Arlington County here, this is right outside Washington, D.C. And again, even here, Youngkin's improving by about 6 points over Donald Trump. So he didn't have to win this area, didn't have to come close to winning this area, but he got the 5, 6, 7, 8 point improvement, Youngkin, that he needed to, combined, as we've been talking about, with it's truly, when you look at some of the margins he's rolling up here in these rural counties, just massive, massive numbers for him there. And that's the recipe for what you're seeing here statewide.
And now, Steve, overall, we've got 87% of the vote in Virginia. In terms of this potentially being called, we are expecting right now that McAuliffe's about to give a speech. We don't expect that it's going to be a concession speech, a senior official with the campaign telling us that he's due to speak any minute. And we expect that the message will be, there's more vote out there. There's a lot more votes still to count. Don't give up. Is that a rational message at this point?
Yeah, I'm just taking a look here at our spreadsheet to see where there is still vote left. Like I said, what the Democrats still have here are a couple of places. Prince William is an example of this. I just put it up on the screen. You see about 60% of the vote is in Prince William County. What is still to come in Prince William County is going to be the absentee vote. So it's going to be the more Democratic vote. But I'm just looking at the numbers here. What's left, even if you applied like the level of support that Joe Biden got in 2020 and you applied it here, McAuliffe might be able to net 15,000 votes. Again, he's trying to make up 126,000 statewide. There also still are some places, I'm looking at on the map here, there are still some places left much, much smaller than in Prince William County, but places where there's still vote out that are Republican, where the vote is going to be Republican. So not every area that reports more vote right now is cutting into that Youngkin lead. So it's just tough to look at what's left on here. And I think especially just to look at the trends that are so well established, again, throughout the state tonight. I'll just take you down to Virginia Beach. Again, now we're starting to get a lot of the absentee. Virginia Beach is not moving that much toward McAuliffe. The trends are so well established, it's hard to see where McAuliffe could come up with 125,000 votes and change at this point.
In terms of the timing here, obviously the decision desk makes an independent decision in terms of when it makes these calls. They're not influenced by us, and we have no ability to try to influence them if we wanted to. But we can watch the signs from the campaigns. And as I said, we are expecting Terry McAuliffe to be speaking any moment. And there's no sign that this is going to be a concession speech. Again, we've got some advance word about what the word is going to be, but we've got eyes on that room right now. You see, we're showing that live shot right now at McAuliffe headquarters. You're starting to see people get up on stage. Can we take that full frame for just a moment, just so we can see how they're setting up these remarks expected again from Terry McAuliffe? There he is. Let's go to this live. He's greeted by his supporters at his campaign headquarters in Virginia.
Well, good evening, everybody. What an honor to be here with you tonight. Let me first of all thank you for coming out here tonight. And I want to thank our great Governor, Ralph Northam, and Pam Northam, for the great work that they have done. So we still got a lot of votes to count. We got about 18% of the vote out, so we're going to continue to count the votes because every single Virginian deserves to have their vote counted. Let me first of all, I want to thank everybody here with us tonight. It has been a great campaign. I started this campaign 328 days ago. I have done an average of 7 to 10 events a day for the last 328 days. And it was great to be out here. And we opened up this campaign. When I kicked off this campaign down in Richmond with my great co-chairs, LeVar Stoney and Louise Lucas and Charnell Herring to talk about how we needed to rebuild all of our schools here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and raise teacher pay and get every child access to a pre-K education and to get everybody access to broadband here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we have continued to take that fight throughout this Commonwealth. But first of all, I want to thank my family. I want to start by thanking... I want to thank my wife, Dorothy. As you know, she has been a champion, a true policy expert. And through her efforts, as you know, 13 million more meals served to needy children here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I want to thank my family. You know, you don't get to pick your parents, as you know. You're born into family. And they have survived campaign after campaign. And I want to thank Dory, who is here with me tonight, with her fiancé, Nick, who's here with us tonight. Jack Mcauliffe, who is here with his fiancée, Shannon, tonight. Sally Mcauliffe. And Peter Mcauliffe. So let's count all these votes, but let me thank each and every one of you over the course of the last 11 months for the doors that you've knocked on, the phone calls that you made. Just last weekend, 450,000 doors knocked on, 2 million during the course of this campaign. I want to thank you. The Mcauliffe family loves each and every one of you. Thank you for what you've done for this campaign. And I want to thank my campaign staff. It was the greatest campaign staff ever assembled, and give them a great round of applause for all the great work they have done. But folks, as I said long ago, this is a different state. When Ralph and I were elected 8 years ago, we have made our state open and welcoming, but the fight continues. We got to make sure we protect women's right to choose here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We got to make sure everybody gets quality, affordable health care here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Everybody's entitled to a world-class education here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we are going to continue that fight tonight and every day going forward. So I just want to thank all of you for what you have meant to us. I look around this room and I see so many friends we've worked with for many years. This is a different state. We are the greatest state in the United States of America, and it's because of you. Thank you. God bless you, and let's go on and forward. Thank you.
Democratic candidate Terry Mcauliffe. He is the former governor of Virginia. He is in the running tonight to become the next governor of Virginia as well. An upbeat speech and a weird little dance from Terry Mcauliffe tonight. Not a concession, although the NBC News characterization of that race right now is that it is too close to call with Youngkin in the lead. Again, we've got a lot of the vote in Virginia. We've got about 87% of the vote in. There's a difference of about 120-something votes, 120,000-something votes between the two of them. We are expecting, I think, that we will also get remarks from Glenn Youngkin. Again, that was not a concession speech from Terry Mcauliffe talking about how much vote remains to be counted and thanking everybody for their participation in his campaign. We have no way to characterize Youngkin's expected remarks either, other than to show you this live shot of his headquarters, his very exuberant crowd. And we are, I think, expecting to hear from him sometime soon. Again, no characterization of what those remarks may include. Our beloved colleague Lawrence O'Donnell is here. It's so nice to see you in person, my friend.
Nice to see you. Great to be here.
How's this night been for you thus far?
Well, I think people have to remember we were watching to see if Terry Mcauliffe could do something that has never been done before. Virginia has one-term governors, apparently for a reason. Apparently, Virginia voters like it that way. There has been exactly one who managed to get a second term, and that was Mills Godwin. He won as a Democrat in 1965, and in 1973 he won again but as a Republican at that time. Okay? So that's Virginia. This is, if Terry McAuliffe pulls this off, the very first time in history a Democrat will have won a second term. So that's how high the mountain was that he's been trying to climb. And there's 4 years of this campaign that has been largely ignored, and that was the 4 years of his governorship. So those Virginia voters had an opinion about that they carried through this campaign. I think many of them immune from the entire campaign because their mind was made up at that point. And so that's another hard thing for McAuliffe because that's usually a negative decision that they've made about incumbents. And so it's remarkable if he can pull this off, and it is simply history behaving itself if he does not pull this off.
That's exactly right. As I said, we are expecting Glenn Youngkin to speak, we think, shortly, we think. We're going to take a quick break because we don't think that's immediately imminent. But when we come back in, we're going to check back in with that New Jersey governor's race, which is too early to call, with Democratic incumbent Governor Phil Murphy in the lead. We're also going to check back in with this very tight race in Virginia that has not yet been called. And we do think we may get remarks from Glenn Youngkin. Lots still to come tonight, lots still to be decided. Stay with us. The night is young. In addition to these big high-profile governor's races we're watching, we've been watching some interesting mayor's races around the country, including this, our first look at the Boston mayoral race. This is a runoff between the two candidates who placed as the first two contenders in the earlier Boston mayor's contest. Michelle Wu was the first place finisher in that earlier contest. Anissa Essaybi-George is running fairly close. This is about 30% of the vote in. Michelle Wu with a 13-point lead. I would never forgive myself if I didn't ask Lawrence O'Donnell for an instant reaction to that.
Well, Michelle Wu has had bigger leads than that in the polls just about every day of this campaign. So the expectation here has been that it will be Michelle Wu. It'd be a gigantic upset if she didn't win. And if she wins, not only will she be Boston's first elected woman mayor, replacing Boston's first woman mayor, Kim Janey, a black woman who took over when Mayor Marty Walsh went into the cabinet, but she will be the first person born outside of Boston's orbit. Almost all Boston mayors were born in Boston. The expanded geography that Boston voters were willing to accept were mayors born in New England, somewhere else, like Maine, maybe in the summer, and you could also be born in Ireland. That was allowed.
It's okay. Yeah.
She was born in Illinois. That's just a wild. Yeah, it's outrageous. And she came there to go to Harvard College, and so this is Boston kind of adjusting to you don't have to be from here anymore.
Wow. It'll never fully adjust. Let's be clear. We are watching a sort of split screen here. The Virginia governor's race. We just heard from Democratic candidate Terry McAuliffe, who gave not a concession speech, but a "there's still more vote out there" speech. We are expecting, we think, Glenn Youngkin, the Republican candidate, who is leading in this too close to call race. We're expecting remarks from Glenn Youngkin. His headquarters is hopping, and his supporters are very, very excited in Virginia tonight. We'll bring you those remarks from Glenn Youngkin if and when he makes them. But again, the characterization on that Virginia race is too close to call, with Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, in the lead. That's with 88% of the vote in. But we've also got an interesting situation in New Jersey. The characterization there is that it's too early to call. Just about half the vote is in, 52% of the vote. But NBC News characterizes this as Phil Murphy, the Democratic incumbent, is in the lead. That's not what it looks like on our screen, Steve. So can you explain that call?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation here. Chitterelli leads in the count, in the running tally, and you can see it ticked up a little bit more. by about 4 points over Murphy. Let me take you through what we know, because it is a little bit complicated. One thing that we're seeing is that areas that in the recent past, I should say, when Republicans like Chris Christie won in New Jersey, when other Republicans have been competitive in New Jersey, Chitterelli is making big, big gains in those areas tonight relative to Donald Trump. So I'm going to just take you through them. Hunterdon County is a very good example here. Almost all the vote is in Hunterdon County. Here's how Trump did last year. Here's how Chitterelli did this year. Now, that is a significant improvement. If you're Chitterelli, you're very pleased to see that. But put this in some perspective. When Donald Trump lost statewide to Joe Biden last year in New Jersey, the margin was 16 points, right? Joe Biden won the state by 16 points. So if you just did kind of a flat improvement, the same improvement for Chitterelli in every county, he'd need to jump 16 points kind of everywhere. So here, Chitterelli's winning by 22 tonight, right? Trump won by about 4.5. We'll call it, let's say 4.5. So that is a difference of about 17.5. That is more than 16. But it's not much more than 16. So it's an encouraging sign for Chitterelli that in an area where Republicans have done very well in the past, he's making that much of an improvement. The question starts to become, okay, is he also making improvements like that in areas that are harder to win for Republicans and also, by the way, bigger in terms of the vote they bring out? So that takes us, for instance, to Essex County. Essex County, one of the biggest in the state. This is Newark and the area right around Newark. Now, here, Joe Biden won by 56 points, basically, last year. Right now, this is mainly mail-in vote that we see right now in Essex County. That's why Murphy's up into the 80s right now. We got a lot of the same day, the vote that was cast today, to come in Essex County. So we want to see what that does. But again, using this as a benchmark, if Biden won by about 56 points here last year, and Chitterelli's goal is to be improving by 16 points, can he keep this within 40 in Essex County? That's a monumental ask for a Republican. Let's see what happens when that same-day vote comes in. But this is a big, core Democratic county. That's a hard number for Chitterelli to hit here. We will see if he does. But if he doesn't, if he falls short of it, then it becomes the kind of situation where, you know, that good number he had in Hunterdon County is a good number that's not quite good enough because he didn't match it in the Democratic area. So we're kind of looking for that dynamic. The other thing I would tell you is I flagged two big kind of suburban counties here and said, let's keep an eye on Bergen and Burlington counties. These are kind of bellwether counties in New Jersey, so we're starting to get more vote in Bergen County. Now here, this is interesting because Chitterelli is making a significant jump over Trump's number in Bergen County. However, the key to this is there is no mail yet included in this Bergen County tally. Some of the counties have included it. The mail is overwhelmingly Democratic. So Chitterelli is doing very well with the election day vote here. What we need to see in Bergen County is when you factor in the heavily pro-Murphy mail vote here, what's that going to land at? Is Chitterelli still going to end up winning this county? Is he still going to end up having a double-digit improvement over Donald Trump there? Same story in Burlington County. Again, right now, Chitterelli is improving leaps and bounds over Trump in Burlington County. There is no mail vote that is part of this. So again, that's a big kind of outstanding question here. When the mail vote gets factored in, is Chitterelli still going to be showing anything like that kind of improvement? That's the kind of improvement he needs to be showing in order to have a shot here. So if you're Chitterelli right now, again, we can reset this to the statewide. A place like Hunterdon County, they're very happy with what they're seeing. We could show you in Monmouth County, you know, getting close to 90% of the vote is in Monmouth County. Monmouth County is the kind of place when Chris Christie was getting elected governor of New Jersey, he was racking up massive margins in Monmouth County. You can see Trump barely carried it last year. And now here's Chitterelli with that almost 20-point improvement in Monmouth County. So he's getting it in a place like Hunterdon. He's getting it in a place like Monmouth. We're taking a look at Ocean County, core Republican county here in the state. Chitterelli is outpacing Donald Trump. The margin of difference between Chitterelli and Trump's performance isn't a ton, although the turnout, we're seeing extremely high turnout here in Ocean County. So that's something for the Republicans to smile at, too. Chitterelli's doing a lot of things in these counties I'm showing you to make this a very competitive race statewide. But I gotta see, And in Bergen and Burlington, the question is the mail vote. We got to see what Bergen and Burlington look like when we actually have the core Democratic vote counted there. And then we got to see the same-day vote in a place like Essex County to see if Chitterelli can land somewhere, much better than he's running right now in Essex County. When you can get a county in like a Bergen or an Essex or a Burlington, something like that, if you can get all the vote in one of those counties and Chitterelli is doing in one of them, something like he's doing in a Hunterdon County or a Monmouth County, then it's game on. So my curiosity is absolutely piqued here, but I want to see. I want to see something outside of one of these sort of traditionally Republican counties swinging back to Chitterelli. I want to see if it's matched in one of these others that I'm talking about.
Steve, you are the only election guru who I would ever ask this question to because I'm so confident in your knowledge of New Jersey politics. What does it mean that Essex only has 18% in the sense that I want to know if I'm going to know who the governor is going to be before I go to bed? I mean, how long will it take Essex to get that number up in terms of how much it's reporting? I mean, not to mention Bergen and Burlington without having any of their mail vote counted, but Essex at only 18% of the vote and hours after the polls have closed. What do you expect from Essex County in terms of their counting pace?
Yeah, and actually what's interesting in Essex County, like I'm saying, is they have a lot of the mail vote counted. When I look at this right now, in terms of being concerned about getting a result tonight, these two are jumping out at me, Bergen and Burlington, for that reason of the mail vote. New Jersey does not allow the counties to open up the mail ballots until midnight of last midnight. They could open these ballots and begin processing them. I don't think they all did. I think there's going to be some I think there's the possibility. This is what we saw in the 2020 election, where the mail ballots are being counted for a couple days after the election. I'm looking at Bergen, I'm looking at Burlington, I'm looking at a few other places like this on the map, and I'm definitely seeing that possibility right now.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are expecting remarks from Glenn Youngkin, the Republican candidate for governor in Virginia. We just had remarks from the Democrat Terry McAuliffe, who said there are more votes to count. This is a race that is characterized as too close to call, with Youngkin in the lead. We're expecting remarks from Youngkin any moment. We'll take a quick break and come back with that right on the other side. Stay with us. We're back with our election coverage tonight here on MSNBC. This is the situation in the New Jersey governor's race, and I did say the situation there on purpose. It's my only reality TV show reference of the entire night. I get one. That's the situation. It's too early to call. The Democratic the Democratic incumbent Phil Murphy is characterized by NBC News as being in the lead, even though the numbers don't look that way on your screen. That's because of which vote has come in thus far in New Jersey. We're continuing to watch that closely. It's turning out to be super interesting. This is the situation in Virginia. NBC News characterizes this as too close to call, with 91% of the vote in now. Too close to call, with Republican Glenn Youngkin leading. We are expecting remarks from Glenn Youngkin fairly soon. We've also been watching down-ticket races in Virginia, because if Glenn Youngkin is elected the new Republican governor in Virginia, one of the big things that will make a big difference in the lives of Virginians is whether he's also got Republicans in the state legislature with whom he can form a governing coalition. Democrats have controlled the governor's house. The governorship and both houses of the state legislature for the last 2 years in Virginia. That's a very rare thing. The Democrats are struggling to hold on to their majority in the State House of Delegates tonight. Nadarius Clark is a 26-year-old Democratic candidate for the Virginia House of Delegates tonight. I want to show you a little piece of tape. This is a little piece of tape from earlier this year. This is the night that Nadarius Clark actually won his spot on the ballot tonight. He won this spot on the ballot tonight by beating a 3-term incumbent in the primary back in June in order to become a candidate for this seat that night. Watch this. If you haven't seen it before, this will stick with you.
This is just truly so remarkable. I'm so happy that I was able to do this, to show Virginia that we needed new representation, that the time is now to make a change. And we did that.
Talk to me about the emotion, all the time and effort you've spent.
Yes, it's been a long 6 months. day in and day out, knocking doors, making calls. It's just so emotional because I didn't think, this would happen. People like me don't normally get this opportunity to represent their community. So it's just so remarkable that we got the opportunity to do this, to show Virginia that a young 26-year-old can make a difference in their community.
That was June 8th. Nadarius Clark beat a 3-term incumbent to become the Democratic nominee for the Virginia House of Delegates. In his district, it represents parts of Portsmouth and Chesapeake and Norfolk. Tonight, Nadarius Clark is leading in that race by, I think it's 13 points at this point. Mr. Clark, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for making time.
Yes, no, thank you for having me.
Am I right that you're up about 13 points right now, looking at the returns in your district?
Yes, you got it right. We're up by 13.
How are you feeling about the prospects tonight? Obviously, your race is an important one. Every race in the House of Delegates tonight is important. But the governorship returns tonight are pretty spooky for Democrats, thinking that the prospect that there may be a Republican governor elected tonight in your state.
Yeah, definitely. We're still hopeful. We got some early votes that still is coming in, but we're still staying optimistic. We ran a great campaign, Democrats up and down the ballot, and I'm hoping that turnout will come out and the results will give us what we're looking for. But we're still ready to fight for these great causes. Democrats have been fighting for up and down the ballot. There's so much still on the line, so we're still keeping our fingers crossed and hoping for the best tonight. But it's looking like I believe that Terry will pull it off once the numbers come through.
Mr. Clark, this is Joy Reid. Quick question for you. You really are at the polar opposite in many ways in terms of the politics of today from the man who's running for governor, Terry Mcauliffe. He is somebody who's been around politics for a very long time. You're obviously a 26-year-old new face. Tell me what you think, if you're able to pull this off, what should that tell Democrats about the kind of candidates who resonate, and what was your core message in the general election to the voters in your district?
Yes, thank you for that question. The main thing that we see is when you get out here, when you're in your community, when you're in your district, when you're knocking doors, making those phone calls, sending text messages, you have to be available to your community, and they will come out and show out for you. And that's what we've been seeing in the general and the primary. We knocked 20,000 doors in the general. We've been helping candidates up and down the ballot with door knocking. And I think what resonates is that people can be tangible and be in their community and stand up for their community when they need it.
Mr. Clark, if you win tonight, you'll be the youngest person ever elected to the Virginia House of Delegates. You'll be the first African-American person elected in your district. Breaking those kinds of glass ceilings is important on any night. At a night when your state seems to be swinging somewhat in the other direction, it has to be not daunting, but it has to be so. You must feel the weight of that. You must feel the responsibility of that, but also the history of that on this evening, I have to imagine.
Yes, definitely. As we know, Virginia has a long history that is a sad history. As we know, Virginia was the capital of the Confederacy, and we was also the first state that introduced slavery. So now just to see that, I am the first African-American to represent the 79th district and the youngest Democrat ever elected for the Virginia House of Delegates is just a long time coming, and my voters agreed, and they said that it's time for, fresh blood and new ideas and innovative, thoughts. So that's where the voters put me here, and I'm just so thankful that they showed up for me. For being out there day in and day out, knocking these doors, meeting the voters. They were so appreciative that someone was out there, and it turned out for the best.
Nadarius Clark, 26-year-old candidate for the Virginia House of Delegates, currently leading in his race tonight. Sir, good luck. Thank you for joining us tonight. Come back soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Again, the results are still unsettled tonight as of Virginia and as of New Jersey. Frankly, watching the New Jersey results come in, to have the distance between that characterization of the race with the Democrat in the lead, but we were looking at the Republican in the lead in terms of the count that we've already got, having absolutely no idea about when any other count is coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of drama tonight. This is a dramatic night.
But is it in a way, it's part of the way that we wind up getting Republicans able to put forward these anti-voter laws? Because these elections are not a thing where you get a result. There's a thing where you get an early result based on who votes that day, and then that could completely change based on when they start counting the absentee, then they start counting the early, you know, once you start counting more votes, things can dramatically change. And I think for a lot of voters who were used to having a call in an election, and it seemed a lot simpler, it's really easy to manipulate people into thinking there's something sneaky going on when it flips.
There's nothing wrong with having these different types of vote that take different amounts of time to count in different places, provided people aren't already wired by propagandists who have been trying to wire them this way to believe that any delay or anything that seems to switch over time against their proven candidate shows that there's something nefarious in the election and the results should be rejected.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we used to have elections going on overnight and into the next day. Many presidential elections, 1960 wasn't decided till the next day, 68 wasn't decided till the next morning, and no one thought there was anything strange about that. It takes a while to count, and then you had the mail-in ballots. Everyone always understood the mail-in ballots would be counted later, actually, because they tended to arrive at the last minute. Ballots from overseas, all of that stuff, and all of that stuff, which we've been doing, you know, for forever, now is considered suspicious activity on the Republican side of elections. It's just one of the strangest outcomes, especially as you've been making the point earlier tonight that mail-in voting used to be a Republican strength. It used to be, you know, something that they were kind of really wired into in a stronger way. And so it's I don't know how you cure this new disease of the mind that has them looking at these votes this way.
You know, it's funny, though. I've seen a lot of sort of snark from dark snark from progressives tonight, particularly online, saying like, oh, now it looks like if your Republican candidate is going to win the governorship in Virginia, does that mean that there weren't any shenanigans? Does that mean that the election did have integrity? You know, Trump personally has been stoking all of these fears and all of this, all of these efforts to undercut the legitimacy of the vote in Virginia. And now that the candidate is winning, suddenly they're being very quiet about that. I think what that ignores is that even after Trump won the presidency in 2016, he continued for 4 years to say that the election that elected him in 2016 was illegitimate and that there were millions of illegal immigrants who had voted and that actually he had also won the popular vote. The point is not just to contest election results that you don't want. It is that. But it is to reject the idea of knowable, objectively true election results, full stop.
And also the issue that GOTV on the Republican side has now become completely wrapped up in questioning the results of elections, right? They're passing these laws because, as Nicole said earlier, they say a fake thing happened. The election was stolen from Trump. But they're saying, well, we're going to fix that. We'll do all of these things to fix a thing that didn't happen. But that's get out the vote strategy. It encourages their voters when you tell them, don't worry, if you come out, we'll guarantee that you're going to win. Trump has actually asked for audits to happen in Florida, in states where he won. He wants all of them, Texas,
Utah.
He wants them all redone because it's a get out the vote strategy to tell his voters, I care about you. When you say you don't trust this process, we believe you. And that's how Republicans operate. They fear their voters. Democrats, I don't know. Well, something different. Ignore them.
I will say, as we are coming up on 11 p.m. Eastern time, our good friend Brian Williams is going to be here with a special edition of the 11th hour, starting just moments from now. We've got both the New Jersey governor's race and the Virginia governor's race not yet called, plus some important mayor's races not yet called. It may feel like we're getting into the shank of the evening. Ask Brian what that means, but the night is young. Stay with us here on MSNBC.